Something strange is happening in American politics, and it feels like the stakes are higher than ever. Have you ever wondered why certain candidates just aren't allowed to rise to power? Maybe you've noticed it. The resistance, the pushback, the relentless media attacks.
President Trump is under fire.
Quote, why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?
Was it hush money to stay silent?
Yes.
Still around $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels.
The Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem.
Growing outrage over how the Trump administration treats illegal migrants. And then they go after us for a Russian hoax. It's a witch hunt hoax.
The witch hunt.
It's a total witch hunt. You have these phony witch hunts.
More than just political opposition, it feels almost orchestrated. I want to share with you an idea that Eric Weinstein discussed during an interview with Chris Williamson. He gave a mind-blowing explanation for why certain candidates aren't allowed to rise to power. His explanation reveals a hidden structure in our democracy. He calls it Democracy A and Democracy B. Eric explains that the United States has, on the surface, what we all believe to be a functioning democracy. The will of the people, elections, the rule of law. This is what Eric refers to as Democracy A. It's the version of democracy we all think we're living in. But there's a second version, one that operates underneath in the shadows. This is Democracy B, a system driven by powerful institutions, international agreements, and a global order that isn't interested in what we want, but what keeps the world stable in their eyes.
One concept of democracy is the will of the people. You hold plebiscites, and even if you do it with an electoral college or political parties, the idea is that the people are elected, by and of and for the people. The other idea of democracy is that democracy is about institutions that sprang from democracy once upon a time, and that those institutions have to be kept strong. Those are two completely different concepts that are overloaded to the same word.
Think about that for a second. Institutions that originally sprang from democracy now have their own agenda. These include international agreements, treaties, and global institutions like NATO, the UN, and multinational corporations. They operate in a way that protects their interests, even if it means going against the will of the people. Now, what does this have to do with Donald Trump? In 2016, something incredible happened. For the first time in a long time, something broke through the system. Trump wasn't supposed to win. He wasn't supposed to even make it out of the primaries. The role of political parties, according to Eric, is to filter candidates, to prune out populist outsiders who don't fit into the pre-approved structure of Democracy B.
So what you have is a situation in which I believe that there are many people in Washington, D.C. who think that Donald Trump cannot become president because he can now go for broke. He's also not going to try to run for re-election. He's relatively unconstrained. He's wealthy. He's learned how to play a lot of these games.
And maybe got a little bit of an axe to grind as well after the last 6 years.
No kidding. And he's a wild card.
That's right. The real function of the parties isn't to offer a choice between different policies, but to ensure that both candidates are acceptable to the international order. Now, in 2016, Trump broke that system. He was a wild card, an outsider, who didn't play by the rules. And for those in power, that was a catastrophe. Think about it. For years, we've been living under the illusion of choice. Every election, we're presented with two candidates, but both are chosen by a system that ensures the international order remains intact. Trump's victory wasn't just a political win, it was a seismic shift. He wasn't supposed to get through, and when he did, the system had to react. Every scandal, every attack, every investigation wasn't just about Trump. It was about protecting the global order. But Eric doesn't stop there. He goes deeper, explaining that the institutions themselves have evolved in such a way that they don't care about the will of the people anymore. They've become self-preserving, and in order to keep their control, they need to make sure that only certain people can rise to power.
There has been a system in place, whether understood explicitly or behind the scenes or implicitly, that says that the purpose of the two American parties is to prune the field of populist candidates so that whatever two candidates exist in a face-off are both acceptable to that world order. So what you're trying to do from the point of view, let's take it from the point of view of, let's say, the State Department, the intelligence community, the Defense Department, and major corporations that have to do with international issues, from arms trade to, food. They have a series of agreements that are fragile and could be overturned if a president entered the Oval Office who didn't agree with them, and the mood of the country was, why do we pay taxes into these structures? Why are we hamstrung? Why aren't we a free people? So what the two parties would do is that they would run primaries. You'd have populist candidates, and you'd pre-commit the populist candidates to support the candidates who won the primaries. As long as that took place and you had two candidates that were both acceptable to the international order, that is, that they aren't going to rethink NAFTA or NATO or what have you, we called that democracy. And so democracy was the illusion of choice, what's called magician's choice, where the choice is not actually, pick a card, any card, but somehow the magician makes sure that the card that you pick is the one that he knows. In that situation, you have magician's choice in the primaries, and then you'd have the duopoly field two candidates, either of which was acceptable, and you could actually afford to hold an election. And the populace would vote, and that way the international order wasn't put at risk every 4 years, because you can't have alliances that are subject to the whim of the people in plebiscites.
This is huge. It's not just about Trump. It's about all populist candidates. People like Bernie Sanders or even RFK Jr. are similarly filtered out by the system. If you don't fit the mold, you're not allowed to succeed. The system relies on presenting candidates who are safe for the world order. Those who will play by the rules set by institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and international defense alliances. Eric's analysis goes beyond just Trump. He discusses how this system evolved especially after World War II, when global cooperation was essential to prevent another catastrophe. The institutions that formed during that time have grown incredibly powerful, and now they operate almost independently of democracy.
As World War II unraveling, the order that has produced the illusion of peace for this length of time. Imagine that you were, let's say in the 2000s, that you had this thing called the Great Moderation. And there was a story that we had finally banished volatility from the markets. None of that was true. What you were doing was you were going farther and farther into a regime without understanding that sooner or later the Jenga tower has to collapse.
So the system wasn't designed with evil intentions. It was designed to prevent global chaos. But here's the catch. Once the system was in place, it became nearly impossible to change. Even if the people want something different, the institutions act to preserve themselves. And this brings us back to Trump. He's unpredictable, uncontrollable. And that's why the system can't tolerate him. Now let's go to a metaphor Eric used that perfectly explains why Trump is so hard to predict and why that unpredictability makes him a challenge for the existing system. Eric talks about a boxer named Emmanuel Augustus. You might have heard of him by his other name, the Drunken Master. He was famous for his unorthodox style where he moved in ways that seemed random, almost chaotic. His opponents never knew where his next punch would come from because he didn't follow the traditional rhythms of boxing. This unpredictability made him extremely difficult to fight. Eric uses this example to explain Trump's impact on policies. Like Augustus, Trump doesn't move in the way politicians traditionally do. He's not predictable, and that's what throws everyone off, especially the people who are trying to control or contain him. Eric points out that just like Augustus and how he confused his opponents in the ring, Trump confuses the political system. The more people try to pin him down or predict his next move, the more he evades them. That unpredictability is why, in Eric's view, Trump is seen as such a threat. The system as it stands relies on everyone playing by a set of unspoken rules, following a certain rhythm, but when someone comes in and completely ignores those rhythms, just like Augustus in the boxing ring, it throws everything into chaos. And that's exactly what Eric says Trump did in 2016. This is critical. The fear isn't just about Trump's policies. It's about what happens when someone who's already broken through the system decides to push even further. He represents a threat, not just to his political opponents, but to the very structure of this hidden democracy B. Eric also raises an even more unsettling idea, that the political system may be so broken that no populist candidate, whether on the left or the right, can ever truly succeed again. The system is too strong, the institutions too entrenched. And this is where things get truly interesting. What if Trump's success was a one-time fluke? What if the system learned from its mistakes and makes sure that no one like Trump or anyone outside the establishment ever gets through again? So where does this leave us? Are we living in a true democracy, or are we just choosing from candidates pre-selected by a hidden global order? Eric believes that the system is designed to protect itself, and Trump, by breaking through, has exposed its vulnerabilities. But the question is, will they let him do it again? As we head into the next election, it's important to remember that this battle isn't just about left versus right, or Trump versus Biden or Kamala. It's about two competing visions of democracy, one that represents the will of the people and one that represents the interest of the global elite. And in this battle, the stakes couldn't be higher. That's it for now, my friends. I'd like to thank you all for watching. See you next time.